Welcome to the Viking Age podcast. It's the official podcast of the VikingAge.com. My name is Chris Schad. I write for the Viking Age as well as bring me the news, zone coverage, and the Brookings Register. We do this every Monday and Thursday, but sometimes Fridays right here on the Viking Age YouTube channel. But we're also here on Apple and Spotify the very next day. But however you consume us, don't forget to rate, comment, share, and subscribe so you never miss a new episode. And we send the word to the masses. You can see our guest. I was going to have the quick reveal, but again, I got a little too cute with the podcast today. He writes for the Daily Norseman and a proud North Dakota State alum. His name is Eric Thompson. Welcome to the show, Eric.
Thank you so much for having me on, Chris. And yes, I'm still a very proud North Dakota State alum. Maybe not as proud as, most of the past decade, but yeah, still very proud. Go Bison.
We will get to your Bison in just a little bit here as we'll preview the Dakota Marker game when we go off the rails. But for right now, we got to talk about the Minnesota Vikings because they are in a playoff hunt right now, 4-4, but they're missing a quarterback. They acquired Josh Dobbs at the trade deadline from the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals get a 2024 sixth round pick in exchange. The Vikings also get a 2024 seventh round pick. So it's basically a pick swap. Kevin O'Connell said that Jaren Hall is likely to start against the Falcons, but Josh Dobbs could make his debut. Let's start here. And I'm going to do this while I quickly shut the door to my office and grab what I needed. So I'm going to let you go very quickly, and I will be back
And you're
in
just
like
going to
20
disappear,
seconds.
and I'll just be okay. I'll fill. I got you.
Yes. Go for it.
Okay. All right. Well, I think for what the Vikings gave up for Dobbs, it is absolutely okay to take a swing at that. If you're doing late day 3 picks for the Vikings to exchange to get at least a pretty viable quarterback. Again, the loss of Kirk Cousins cannot be overstated. I mean, especially the way that Cousins has been playing the last couple of weeks. It was devastating to see him go down with that Achilles injury. And it was one of those, it's especially seeing Aaron Rodgers' Achilles injury earlier this year. It's like, oh, that's the exact same thing. It's an Achilles. He's done for the year. And sure enough, that was the case. The ceiling is much lower. Like even if with Cousins, a lot of things were gonna have to go right for the Vikings to make a playoff, a playoff run more than a 1 or 2 games. That said, it really looked like they might be turning the corner towards that going into the 3-game winning streak here. And again, like only the Vikings, you're the arch rival on the road, you whoop them all day, you beat them by 2 touchdowns, and you still come away from the game feeling like crap. It's like that is the most Vikings thing ever. But just getting back to Dobbs, I think it was a good risk to take. I mean, it's a very low risk move. I think it's as far as the overall outcome of the 2023 season, I don't think it moves the needle very much either way, but I appreciate the move. It gives them a little insurance because Jaren Hall is a very large unknown. He's a 5th-round rookie. Most 5th-round rookies spend most of their time on the bench, and that's what Hall was planning on doing all season. And now with the injury to Nick Mullins on IR, he's thrust into the starting role. It's going to be a huge change, especially with how well Cousins was dictating this offense the last couple of weeks, especially. It's disappointing, but overall with the Dobbs move, and the guy's literally a rocket scientist, so he'll pick up the playbook fact. That's his kind of his MO is he gets to these teams. I mean, he just got to the Cardinals a week or 2 before the season, started 8 games. Again, the Cardinals are an absolute mess. He was much better than I think a lot of people expected. The Cardinals are it's weird to say they're a pretty respectable 1-7 so far, and I think a big reason that was Dobbs. So it's such a bummer to lose Cousins. That's the tough part, and I don't think the Dobbs move is going to make huge difference this year, but it gives him another option, especially if Hall struggles out of the game.
You know, I shouldn't do this because you did a beautiful job filling in for my ball of chaos open to the show. But I just need to take a quick sip of coffee because
Oh, now he's already
I didn't
taunting. Already taunting with the
yeah,
Bruins.
maybe. I
Jeez.
don't know. The Vikings injury, the quarterback thing. I was actually at a SDSU soccer match as this whole thing was happening, and it just kept escalating. You know what I mean? It was just like, oh, Kirk fell down, drive is over. Oh, Kirk's hopping to the sideline. Okay, maybe he got cleated or something. Kirk is now on the cart, and it looks bad. Oh, and then you saw the replay, and like you said, it was the exact same thing we saw with Aaron Rodgers. I always go back to it was a Vikings preseason game. It was the one where Teddy blew up, and I think it was Brandon Oliver. And I think that was the first time I had ever seen like a calf pop with an Achilles tear. Like it just rolls up like a
Was that
lampshade.
was that the Chargers game? The
That was the
preseason game?
Chargers game.
Yes,
Yeah.
and Teddy had that amazing run. It's like, oh my gosh, we got our decade long starter. Yes, yes, I do remember that game, and you're exact. I think it was Oliver. Like that was yeah. When you just see the calf all of a sudden go, from elongated to up like that, you're in trouble.
Yes, when it rolls up like a lampshade, it's not supposed to do that.
Yep.
Um, the Josh Dobbs trade. What I did not want the Vikings to do at the deadline was make a Sam Bradford type deal. The same
Right.
one when, Teddy Bridgewater goes down moments after that game, strangely enough, and the Vikings cough up a first and a fourth for Sam Bradford. He does all right, but I mean, his knee disintegrates into dust, and the Vikings are pretty much left with nothing in 2 years. I didn't want that to happen. I didn't want the Vikings to go ahead and trade multiple draft picks and like Jordan Addison for Kyler Murray or something like that, because that's what I thought they were going to do. They want to be super competitive. They push for it in all scenarios, even when they're 1-4. Like that's where I thought the end game was to get Josh Dobbs, a quarterback that has had success. And you mentioned the Cardinals are have 1-7 or whatever they are right now, but you watch them and you could see kind of progress. It sounds weird, but if you actually watch Cardinals games, you can kind of tell what I'm talking about. And
Mhm.
Dobbs was one of their bright spots because he was getting guys involved on the offense. He didn't have a lot to work with. I mean, it's Marquise Brown and like the corpse of James Conner. Um, just not much there. So the Vikings make a call. They get a guy who was starting a week ago. They get a guy, as you mentioned, is very smart. He can pick up the playbook in an instant. He's done it on several occasions. That being said, I don't think he'll play on Sunday unless Jaron Hall is, oh my God, bad. And like the thing with Hall, a lot of people kind of liked him coming out of the draft. I know our friend of the show, Tyler Fornes, is a big Jaron Hall fan, but the Vikings never wanted him in this situation in year one. They wanted Hall to be able to sit back, learn. And I don't even think they looked at him as like a future starter. They just looked at him as a potential backup where you could save some money. You have a guy that you can trust if something bad happens to Cousins and use him down the line. I looked at Pro Football Focus and they said his like accuracy rating was like 48% in the preseason. And that was against second and third stringers.
Mhm.
So now you're getting the Atlanta Falcons, who, yes, they're down Grady Jarrett, but I see it as a very uphill battle for Jaron Hall, even though I do like the move of Dobbs and I think he'll be the starter long term.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see from Jaron Hall. There was a lot to like about Jaron Hall, especially with where they picked him. A lot of his college film, he's mobile. I think that the Vikings would be wise to maybe throw in a designed quarterback run or two because he's got I think it's like 4.6 something speeds. He can definitely run. And yeah, the accuracy is what was really disappointing in the preseason, I thought, because from what we saw, again, very small sample size. You're playing with backups, you're playing against backups. It wasn't that impressive. It was pretty obvious that Jaron Hall, at least a couple months ago, was not in he was not ready for prime time, and now he's kind of getting thrust into. And again, like I think their plan was to just kind of to bench him, and that's the fact with it. If you have a Nick Mullins in there, you kind of know what Nick Mullins is. He's a hopefully you can get you through a game or two. Now with Cousins out the rest of the year, again, the the ceiling for this season is what it is. But I am totally with you, and with agreeing that I'm so glad the Vikings didn't mortgage their future. That's the one thing that Adolfo Mensa and O'Connell and the whole front office kind of seem to be on the same page about is they're leaving everything on the table for next season, like whether it's salary caps, extensions, where they kind of maneuver in the draft. They have all their options on the table still, and they could have done the panic trade. They could have done, but again, at this point of the season, you're almost halfway through the season. What are you going to get like a quarterback? No one's giving up a starter, and even yeah, the Kyler Murray thing would have been the only possibility, but it sounds like he might actually play for the Cardinals on Sunday. So
Mm-hmm.
again, I'm okay with bringing Dobbs in. I am glad they didn't panic to the fact that, again, this team is 4-4. They were 0-3. They were 1-4, and that this team still needs a lot of work. Even with Cousins, it was going to be an uphill battle to get anything past the wild card round, I think. And now without him, I think that's probably the ceiling. But again, it is what it is. You lose your starting, like why didn't they have a feasible number two in place for the, like, it's like when you have a quarterback like Cousins, that's one of the last things. Like, he has missed one game in his career and it's because of COVID. So like the
Yeah.
injury thing, it's like I can't remember which coach it was, but it's basically, I'll make it a little more PG-13, but he's like, basically, if the starting quarterback goes down, we're effed, and we don't practice effed. I can't. There was a great quote, but that was like, that's basically,
Who did
that's
say
kind of what you
that?
have.
I
Yeah,
know what
it
you're
was.
talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's kind of the case. And Kirk is gone for the season, and they're kind of effed. So I'm glad they didn't make themselves more effed by trading away too much.
Like, I think obviously I'm still excited about the season a little bit because I want to see how it ends. Like, do the
Mhm.
Vikings somehow make the playoffs? Do they make a run? Does somebody step up at quarterback and we get kind of excited there? Like, if Jaron Hall balls out in the next 9 games, I had to do my math there because 17 game schedule.
I know.
If he balls out in the 9 games here, we're excited. We're just like, okay, maybe you could use him for a little bit. But I mean, I'm more focused on Dobbs when it comes to the future because I think it might be Jaron Hall's job to lose because if he does play well on Sunday, he probably will get it for at least another game.
Hmm.
But I also wonder if he's just a placeholder to hold Dobbs up to speed. And when Dobbs comes in, he might have a future with the Vikings beyond 2023 because he is a free agent after this season. Nick Mullins could be cut. The Vikings could save $1.9 million. And if you're looking towards, hey, the Vikings might not bring Kirk back, Dobbs could be that cheap stopgap for a 2024 quarterback. And then you go in there. Like, where do you think this all plays out? And where do you think Cousins winds up after tearing his Achilles with that pending free agency?
Yeah, I mean, the Cousins thing I'll put aside for, like, we'll get to Dobbs and Hall. I think this is a great way. Again, I wouldn't call it a blessing in disguise because losing your QB1 is always terrible. But now the Vikings get to see what they have in Hall. It might be
Mhm.
a little unfair to thrust him into this and expect something right out of the gate, but then you do have the stop. So I think Hall gets at least this Sunday, and it would make sense for me unless it's an absolute disaster. Give him at least 2-3 games to get going. If he's completely not ready, then you throw Dobbs in because he's a known entity and he's a serviceable quarterback. But if Hall, this is a great trial run for him. We get to see what Jaron Hall can do with a real NFL offense, and he's got weapons at his disposal. Even with Jefferson out, it sounds like he's coming back sooner than later from the IR from his hamstring injury. You have Addison, you have Hawkinson, and you have some weapons there, and you have an offensive line that has been that was the other thing about Cousins. Like, that's the one thing you could always point to. Well, Cousins just doesn't have the offensive line. The offensive line on the whole has been pretty dang good. It's at best, but definitely been above expectations for the offensive line. So if that's kind of it's Jaron Hall's job to lose right now. Like, if he goes out and plays well, obviously the Vikings will keep him going because he's on a rookie contract. He's going to be cheaper going forward. And if he struggles, then you have Dobbs in place, and then I think that's kind of the what I would say the most likely outcome for these two is for between Hall and Dobbs. It is kind of a tryout for the backup quarterback for next year. I
Mhm.
wouldn't be ecstatic unless Hall is amazing and completely different from the preseason. I mean, it'd be a great problem to have if Hall plays well and you have a quarterback controversy to see who can start next in 2024. But I think this is kind of the audition. Like, is Hall the guy to at least be in the mix next season, or if he's a disaster, is Dobbs the guy to be in the mix next season? Because that's another, like, if hopefully, because we've had the Sean Manions, we've had the Nick Mullins, and like Mullins hasn't been called into to play for the Vikings, but we've seen him when he was at the 49ers. Had a few good games, but most of the time it's a backup guy. So that's kind of what's on the line, I think, for that. As far as Cousins goes, that is, I don't know, man. At this point, it's so hard, especially when he heard it. It's like, is Cousins going to be ready by the beginning of next season? That's really iffy. A lot of these Achilles injuries, again, you see these Aaron Rodgers stories, like, oh, he might start in December. It's like, great, good job, buddy. Like,
I
because
do
I'm
I
sure
do
you have.
wonder what he like told him in that. I mean, I think they released it or whatever, but it was just like, "Hey, Kirk, when I tore my Achilles, I rode across the starship pane on the Grimlock galaxy, and the moon was blood red and the stars were evil." And Kirk was
Right.
like, Hey, do you believe in Jesus as your Lord and Savior? You might want to think about it there, Aaron. But go on.
That yeah, conversation must have been great. Yeah, I'm sure the holistic healing of his Achilles that Rodgers has been going through. I'm sure had Kirk really took that into account. But yeah, so that's the thing. It's if Cousins is ready, I think he's done enough. And like this is the one thing. It's like if you're the Vikings, do you maybe offer him something like, hey, here's another year or two for cheaper, and then we'll still say you're the guy next year. I doubt that just because like Cousins, if anything, has maximized his earning potential his entire career.
Mhm.
And as much as I think that he really likes his fit here in Minnesota, and I think he likes playing for the franchise. Cousins is still going to try to get the most. Again, this is probably his last big contract of his career, if everything goes well with the Achilles healing. So at this point, I'll give you the big shrug emoji as far as what Cousins is like. I think both Adolfo Mensa and KOC said they've definitely left the door open to him coming back, and they both have given him like they've both said Kirk knows how we feel about him, so they like him. They like him as an option. But again, that's not a guarantee either way, and it's going to be a long off season for. I mean, that's going to be the number one topic of debate until it's settled. It's do you or do you not bring him back? And again, it'd be a great problem to have. Oh, are we okay with Jaron Hall on the cheap rookie deal? And then you can go out and fill out a roster around him for a lot cheaper. That's wishful thinking, in my opinion, but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I look at this whole. I mean, if anybody's watched the podcast before, I'm not the biggest Kirk Cousins fan.
What?
Although the last two, no, yeah,
But
and if
even
you
you, but
follow me
even
on,
you, like you have come
yeah,
like even like the most ardent guys are like, oh, Kirk, he just drives you nuts. Like Drew McGarry had a really good article on the Defector yesterday. It's basically the begrudging, like he's never been a fan of Cousins either, but he's like, even these last few weeks, especially, it's like like he's a good quarterback, and he is like that. You have to accept that part at least.
and you wanted to see this play out, right? Because, like you did mention, there were parts of this team that were thriving that have never thrived since Kirk Cousins has been here. The offensive line, that was not like a 2 game flash. And like you look at Kirk and be like, okay, he's had 2 games like this before. Like he's been able to do this. You look at the offensive line, the offensive line has never been able to do anything like they've done over the
Right.
first 8 games. You also have your defense too, which is coming around under Brian Flores. And you look at all that and like, the timing could not be worse. Where
Mhm.
I got proven wrong was, I think a lot of people assume like Kirk just rubs people the wrong way and everything like else. And maybe he did in the Zimmer area. Maybe he rubbed one person the wrong way instead of the entire team, because you heard guys like Harrison Smith out there, praising him. Brian O'Neill, he was like watering up. Garrett Bradbury said when the Vikings are out there, Kirk Cousins is out there. They love this guy. Kevin O'Connell said in the post-game presser, or excuse me, the trade deadline presser, I love Kirk. You mentioned it too. We know how he feels about him. Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah also gave a little bit of praise to Kirk, but he also mixed this in, which kind of raised my antennas a little bit. He said, my want for Kirk to come back is not a me thing. It's a negotiation. You
Mhm.
come together at a table and try to see everything works together. We'll have that dialogue when the time comes. Now, obviously, he can't go out there and be like, oh, yeah, blank check, Kirk Cousins, sign him up. How many years do you want? How many? They didn't do that with Justin Jefferson. Like,
Right.
he's not going to do that with Kirk Cousins. But like you said, too, Kirk maximizes his value. He's going to try to get the most money possible out of everything. He's not going to go and sign a contract right now because that doesn't give him leverage. It's the same reason why he wasn't going to waive his no trade clause, because it gives him no leverage. He's going to take this thing to free agency. He's going to see who the highest bidder is, and he's going to go. Is there a possibility that he takes a lower deal with the Vikings? Because we saw that in his first free agency, right? He had that documentary where he was talking to the Jets. He got them to have a high offer. He went back to Minnesota, said, hey, here's what they're offering. What can you give me? And then he just signed with the Vikings because that's where he wanted to go.
Mhm.
That's entirely possible as well. A 30, he's going to be what, 37 next year, 36, coming off a
Uh,
torn Achilles.
Maybe
Um,
35-ish, 36-ish, but yes, mid-30s. I mean,
yeah.
the quarterback careers are definitely longer these days, but you cannot expect every quarterback to be Tom Brady as far as like that. That's the thing about if Aaron Rodgers comes back, is he going to be awesome? Like that is not a guarantee. That it, yeah, because our guy Kirk just turned 35 a couple months ago, so he'll be 36 next year.
And that's where this turns interesting because Dan Marino tore his Achilles. He wasn't the same quarterback. Kirk, not a mobile guy. It's not like they have to take out the read option because Kirk tore his Achilles now. But I also think, too, if Kirk does get that better deal somewhere else and he goes, okay, I'm going here, this is where I see them maybe re signing Dobbs and diving into that 2024 quarterback class, which is really, really enticing for the Vikings in the long term.
Yep, that's another big factor is that the 24, like again, the Vikings aren't going to be in a place to just sit there and draft a Caleb Williams or Drake May.
Mm-mm.
That said, if they're really in, do you trade up a lot? Do you give up a lot of draft capital because they still have a decent amount? They didn't mortgage a lot of the future. Yes, they're missing a second rounder because of um the Hawkinson trade, things like that. But like they're still sitting pretty well. But that there, it's not just a two quarterback class. There are a lot of really cool options, and that's the thing. It's like there are so many moving pieces and factors going into next year, and that's in Adolfo Mensa's quote. That's basically, I think that's where he's saying he's like they are keeping every option on the table and making the best decision, and I like that because that it's going to there's going to be a ton of different options at their disposal, and I don't envy their choices because there are some really high stakes choices to be made going into 2024. But the fact that they can make them and they haven't put themselves into a corner, and I'm not just throwing this out there as an example, like traded away a second rounder for an edge rusher when you're 2-6, and you haven't they have guaranteed to resign him. Not that anyone else in the NFC North has done that or anything, but yes, like that. At least they're
Uh,
keeping all their options on the table. It's a tough. It's like there's going to be no shortage of things to talk about, regardless of how the 2023 season ends for the Vikings.
let's talk about some of the rest of the stuff the Vikings did at the deadline. They traded Ezra Cleveland to the Jaguars for a 6th-round pick. Um, I have very limited notes on this because I thought it was a good move because Reisner has been good and Cleveland might want to be a tackle and leave in free agency. You got any thoughts?
I was hoping they could get a little more than a sixth for Cleveland, just
Sure.
because I think Cleveland is like still again he's not like he's an all pro by any means, but he had been serviceable, and I think he's like the eighth or ninth highest graded guard by PFF so far this season. I think it was a good move for the Jaguars because that was a place like that they were pretty iffy in the interior offensive line. I think that really helps them. And again, like if you're not re-signing Cleveland because I think this is the last year of his rookie deal, and if the Vikings had kind of moved on and they preferred Reisner, which I'm fine with that part, you're
Yeah.
getting something for him rather than just letting Cleveland walk. I think that was probably what it was. And again, like I think it just sounds like Reisner is might be a better fit, just kind of culture wise. And I think he's been plug and play so far. Like again, I don't think his grades have been that great, but at least from what I've seen, the best thing you can usually do is not really notice a guard a lot, like live during the games. You go back and you can kind of pick apart. Okay, are they getting to the second level on run blocks and stuff like that? But Reisner seems consistent. He seems sound. His like I think he's just fine. So yeah, it's again, I thought, maybe you can get like a fifth rounder, maybe even a fourth for Cleveland. Because again, he's been a starter for most of his career so far in the NFL. That said, it's getting something back when you might not have been able to get anything for him after the season, and you have a good replacement. The one thing though is now it's again, I hope the Vikings must like Blake Brandel a decent amount because again, like that it leaves them thin. Like if after Brandel in the interior offensive line, it's kind of scary. And Bradbury's already had his injury. He's been out. He's missed a handful of games already this season. And speaking of Bradbury, do you think anyone is more happy about Grady Jarrett being out than Bradbury? I think was it Bradbury's rookie year? He got a 0.0 pass blocking
Yeah.
grade against
His
Jarrett against
his
the Falcons.
first game in the NFL.
Yeah,
A
it was
big
like,
old donut.
oh, he just got ragdolled that entire game. Yeah, so that's just a quick aside. Yeah, again, like it was an okay move. I wasn't like the first when I saw the compensation, I'm like, really, that's it, a sixth rounder. But when you take a step back and think about it, it's they got what they got, and then when you look at what the net of the day, you're getting rid of a guard that wasn't starting, you're getting a solid backup or maybe starting quarterback down the stretch, and you're basically it's a wash with the picks. That's fine. That's good.
Um, yeah. I mean, NFL trades are weird, and it kind of falls into the next thing here. The Vikings didn't decide to trade Daniil Hunter. I didn't. Once they got to 4-4, I didn't expect that to happen. But I think some other factors screwed everything else up here. The Commanders, yeah, I'll mention them by name. They give Washington a second round pick for Montez Sweat. They're
Or the
at two
Bears
and
did.
six right.
Yeah, the Bears. Yeah.
Yeah. My bad.
Yeah.
I got them flipped around here. So the Bears gave Washington a second round pick for Montez Sweat. And then the 49ers gave Washington a third round pick for Chase Young, who is better, but will probably be injured by Christmas because offensive genius Kyle Shanahan runs a boot camp for a football practice. You also had the Packers, who just happened to reach a new deal with Rashawn Gary on Monday morning. Funny how that timing works.
Mm-hmm.
Was it the right decision for the Vikings to keep Danielle Hunter? And, should they have done more maybe to lean into the opportunity to go get a quarterback after we just spent, the first 20 minutes of his podcast talking about it?
Well, again, I think with how everything unfolded, again, the Vikings are 4-4, and with Dobbs or Hall playing decent, but the Vikings are currently in the playoffs right now. If they can go 9-8, that might get you in, because the NFC after it's pretty top heavy. You got the top contending teams. You have the Eagles, you have the Cowboys, you have even the 49ers after their 3-game losing streak. I think they'll be just fine. And Seattle looks like they're pretty solid too. After that, it is. I mean, it is the seventh seed in the NFC playoffs this year. I I wish I could guess what the spread is going to be on that game. Like, they're going to be 10-point underdogs, right? No, regardless of who's playing and who the other seventh team is, because it is a mess in the middle of the NFC. So, but yeah, so that part is great. The Hunter, unless someone came in with a Godfather offer, that would have been like,
Yeah.
if it comes out later that they turned down like a first round and something else or something like that for Hunter, then I'd be upset. But I don't think that was out there. I think anything less than like a top 40-ish to 50-ish pick for Hunter probably wasn't worth it. He is such a huge integral part of this team. Now, like, it makes it a lot more if the Vikings can work out a new deal with Hunter in the offseason, then it makes the move not to trade him that much better. If they let him walk, then you can kind of have the debate about it, especially with how this 2023 season ends. But again, yeah, with what the market was doing for all these weird trades, again, the Bears, who are they bidding against for Sweat for that second?
Yeah.
Like, were there other teams coming in that anyways? But the I really like, I mean, again, Hunter, just as a fan, of course, I love it because Hunter has been one of my favorite players on the team since the day he walked in. It's always cool to have a real life human action figure on your team. So it's, and again, he has 10 sacks. Like, he's leading the league in sacks. He is a huge impact player, and he's a big part of that defense. Like, the defense is coming around. The personnel still isn't there with some of these top defenses. Flores he's making some magic with what he has at his disposal. And if you took Hunter away from that, I just don't see how the defense is competitive. Again, like, they're kind of stuck in the middle. I don't think the ceiling's too high, but I like the the decision to keep Hunter. And again, that's another thing where Adolfo Mensa in the front office, that's another option. Are they going to be able to re-sign Cousins and Jefferson and Hunter to mega deals? Probably not. But all three of them are still on the table at this point, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, like you said, they're keeping their options open. This whole situation kind of reminds me a little bit of, and not, I mean, you and I obviously probably weren't cognizant of what was going on with the Vikings back then, but Chris Dolman, at the end of his career, he had a couple of big years, kind of like Danielle Hunter did. He got up there in age a little bit, and the Vikings were like, well, we could pay him, but we don't know when the age cliff is coming. They trade him to the Atlanta Falcons for a first and a second round pick. They may have gotten some change in that deal as well, but they wind up taking Derek Alexander with that first round pick in 1995, I believe. He goes on to have a mediocre career. 1998, the Vikings ranked 19th in sacks. John Randall gets hurt. They can't get pressure on Chris Chandler. And you might have heard the Vikings lost that NFC Championship game after going 15-1. Meanwhile, Chris Dolman had double-digit sacks for 3 straight years with the 49ers, and the Vikings re-signed Chris Dolman in 1999 to get a pass rush. It's not as easy as you think to get a Danielle Hunter. That's why the Vikings tried to do it for years and years on end and tried to, say that DJ Wanham was it, but no, he was not indeed the next Danielle Hunter. I think they got to pay him. At this point, you absolutely have to pay him. You have to reach some kind of, I think Phil Mackey of Purple Daily said 3-year deal was a good like benchmark. Maybe you can get that if somebody goes crazy and they give them some kind of astronomical contract you can't afford. I totally understand it. But like you said, unless like somebody was going to give you like the Falcons deal, a first and a second round pick, then I'm okay keeping them. I'm okay with kind of giving this locker room a bone, not tearing it down. Like you got to remember too, Kevin O'Connell has been kind of preaching this don't give up thing since the moment he got here. If the Vikings would have went ahead and traded Hunter, Hicks, Cleveland, everybody after Kirk Cousins went down, it's kind of like, what is the front office doing? Giving up? No,
Mm-hmm.
no, no, no. They're not giving up. They're thinking about the future, and you could be here too. No, we're not going to do that. So I don't know. I liked what the Vikings did as a whole at the trade deadline. It was good enough to keep going, and it was also not bad enough to lose the locker room. And I think it sets up for an interesting second half moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And like Hunter's still only 29 years old. Like with that Dolman trade, I think he was 33 when they traded him, and he still had
Mm-hmm.
5 more years. And that's so like there, Hunter still has a lot of good football in him. And yes, like both of the injuries that he sustained a couple of years back, like they were very freak injuries. That the torn pec,
Yeah.
like he's making tackle. Like if it's structural stuff with feet and knees and stuff like that, that's one thing. Hunter still has a lot of great football in him, and I hope they keep him around too.
So let's move on down the line here. The Minnesota Vikings will take on the Atlanta Falcons on Sunday. Kickoff is at noon on Fox. Chris Myers, Mark Schlereth, and Christina Pink will be on the call for Fox. The Falcons are favored by 4 points. That was as of Thursday afternoon. I haven't checked it here on Friday morning. But this is game one without Kirk Cousins. So how do you think it turns out?
Yeah, this is going to be really interesting. Yeah, I've seen the line at 4 and 4.5 most of the week, so it's around there. Super excited to hear Mark Schler. No, I'm not excited to hear Mark Schlereth on the call, but this could again. It seems like Falcons and Vikings games are kind of nuts by definition, like throughout the years. I mean, the one where they absolutely murdered the Vikings at and in Minnesota that came out of nowhere because the Falcons weren't going anywhere. This is going to be interesting. It looks like it's going to be low scoring. Like that's kind of that's the I think the Vikings are probably going to lean a little more on the run game because they're just out of they have to kind of thing. Like that, it's not like the run
Yeah.
game has been much to lean on thus far. I think that the Heineke move is really interesting because I like Ritter. He has to be maddening for Falcons fans because there is so much good things that he can put on that tape, and he makes some great plays, and then he makes some of these plays where you're like, how what are you doing? Like kind of things, and like the turnovers were a little bit of bad luck, and the Vikings know all about that. I mean, the Vikings and Falcons should probably have about 25 more points each, I think, this season, just from red zone stupid turnovers alone. But yeah, it'll be really interesting because the Falcons they have a run game. I think we're going to talk about it a little bit. They could have an even better run game if they leaned on a certain eighth overall pick. But
Yeah.
they're it's I think it probably comes down to mistakes, like who because these two teams are pretty efficient at shooting themselves in the foot. It's going to come down to who makes the fewest mistakes. Does Hall throw a bad interception? Does Heineke throw a bad interception? Does Heineke get bailed out by the back judge again, like he did the last time the Vikings played him when he was in Washington? So, like, I really nothing would surprise me. Like, it could be a 30-point blowout either way, or but I would guess it's probably like it's something low scoring and pretty close because both of these teams have a lot of positives, but a lot of them have like they're both teams have some pretty fatal flaws. And I think it's fitting that they're both 4-4 right now because that kind of is reflective of both teams.
This feels a lot like the last time the Vikings went down to what is it, Mercedes-Benz Stadium? Or
Yep. Yes, one
yeah.
of the two that's weird. Both and it's the Saints and the Falcons are both called Mercedes Benz, right? Like,
Yeah, it would be like if, the Vikings had Lambeau West or
yeah,
something.
uh-huh.
Like it's very confusing. I was trying to think it because one's just Mercedes-Benz Superdome and the other one's is or maybe that's Caesar's Superdome now. I don't know. Like
It's hard to keep. I know Mercedes Benz at least used to sponsor the Superdome, but yeah, let me. I'll Google it. But I think
there's
it's.
like 10 State
Oh,
Farm arenas
it is
too,
yes,
but
it is the Caesars Superdome now, so that is
okay.
less confusing. And I know it's Mercedes Benz Superdome because I just retweeted their account because they're planning on opening the roof. The weird
Ooh,
sphincter looking roof is going to be open in Atlanta. Looks like an
that's a
awesome
cool.
stadium. It looks like a great stadium though.
Yeah, that's a cool looking stadium with that ribbon scoreboard and everything. I mean, I think US Bank Stadium's pretty damn cool, but what they got going down there in Atlanta is pretty awesome as well.
Mhm.
We talked a lot about Jaron Hall. What about the rest of the offense? Do you think Jordan Addison keeps rolling on Sunday? Do you think TJ Hawkinson keeps rolling? Or do we see a little bit more of that running game that hasn't really been great this year, but they're trying to get it going?
I think you see just again like by default they're going to see more Cam Akers and Madison. And I'm personally hoping it's a little more Akers than Madison. Madison, I love the guy off the field. He is one of the best, you know, charity guys that the Vikings have. He is
Right.
a great interview. He's an awesome guy. It's just I don't. He used to just be that like his claim to fame was one cut, get you 5-6 yards, and he just seems to be dancing around way too much this season. And I think it's reflective of his stats. And but the thing is, I think I believe he is like sixth worst in rushing yards over expected. I think he's like minus 52 yards. Madison is fourth worst is Cam Akers. So, but that said, I think Cam Akers is in the 60s overall for the season for minus uh, rushing yards over expected. He was minus 41 in week one with the Rams. Like that first game was such a disaster. That's kind of why he's on the Vikings right now because the Rams are
Yeah.
like, no, we can't do it. So, but Cam at least he's shown more burst. It seems like a little more potential. Again, neither of these guys is Barry Sanders. That's a problem. Like that, it's. I think they're going to have to get creative with how they run. If it's just stuff between the tackles, I don't. I think they're going to see some heavy boxes and make Jaron Hall prove to them that he can beat him. But I think Jordan Addison's also going to be open. If Jaron Hall can get him the ball consistently, I think that's going to open up a lot of stuff. I think TJ Hawkinson is going to get a lot of targets. Even before Cousins went down, Hawkinson was right up there with the team lead in targets, especially in things that's under 10 yards. So I think that they give it to their tight end early and often and get Jaron Hall into the game. I hope they use their screens sparingly because, again, even with Cousins, the screens are pretty iffy, and those it just seems like more goes wrong than right with that. So, yeah, it's the offense is going to be worse without Kirk Cousins. Surprise, surprise. It just depends on how much worse to see if the Vikings can be competitive, not only in this game but going forward in the season.
I always laugh at the running backs don't matter. You can just go get a community college guy and plug him into the backfield and, watch him run for 1,000 yards in this scheme. It's like, well, okay, there's a difference between certain running backs. Like even the 49ers, Kyle Shanahan, one of the godfathers of this just use anyone philosophy, went and traded like what, 5 draft picks for Christian McCaffrey. And I think that's working out for him right now.
Doing okay.
The
Yeah.
Yeah, and the Vikings got rid of Dalvin Cook, who is not performing real well in New York right now. But, the whole Alexander Madison thing, I've said it multiple times. He was put in a bad situation by the Vikings. The Vikings didn't even use him last year. I think part of that was because Dalvin Cook, he's a guy that needs his carries to get going, but
Mhm.
Madison just hasn't found his footing at all. Cam Akers hasn't been much better, but I think now they absolutely need that running game to produce because that's the best way that you can help out a young quarterback. It's exactly what the Cardinals did. I think the Cardinals are like third in the league in rushing yards per game. And part of that might have been because Dobbs is a mobile quarterback that can kind of run around the field a little bit. But, you know, I look at Jordan Addison, like you said, he's going to be open. Can Jaron Hall get him the ball? TJ Hawkinson is going to be open. Can Jaron Hall get him the ball? That's going to be it. I don't think they're going to be using the air raid on Sunday, but they need to have an efficient running game. And the absence of Grady Jarrett definitely helps them out there too. On defense, this is such a strange Falcons offense because I don't know if Arthur Smith is like, I know he joked about it in a press conference, but it's kind of like, why are you thinking about fantasy football when you're, doing play calling? Like I saw a tweet last night that was just hilarious because they're like, reporter asked legit question, why aren't you using Kyle Pitts? And Arthur Smith says, well, Kyle Pitts doesn't deserve a safe place to live or clean drinking water. Like it's like gotten to that point where it's just like you have a top 5 pick in Kyle Pitts, you don't use him. You have a top 5 pick in Drake London, you barely use him. You have 8th overall pick from last year's draft, a running back. You made PFF's heads explode with that draft pick, and you're not using him either. You're just force feeding Tyler Algier, who is in the same class as Alexander Madison and Cam Akers. Like Arthur Smith, something, it must just because he has a mustache. Like Jake Middleton of the Wild has a mustache and like he's terrible and everybody loves him because, oh, he's funny. He does this interviews with his shirt off. Maybe that's the next step for Arthur Smith. Just
Oh
start doing
gosh.
tarps off interviews and just, on Pat McAfee or whatever.
Oh yeah, there you go.
This offense is weird, man. But I mean, the defense is coming around. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, that's the
I don't
thing.
even know how to analyze this.
Well, I mean, this like you don't have to get into PFF grades or like analytics. Bijan Robinson has 92 carries. He is averaging 5.1 yards per carry this year.
He
Tyler
has less
Algier,
touches
yeah,
than Alexander
yes.
Madison.
Well, he has Tyler Algier has 104 carries. He is averaging 3.2 yards per carry. You're on the same team. You're in the same offense. It doesn't take a rocket scientist. And like, I mean, that's the one thing. Like, I hope I see a lot of Tyler Algier. Like, maybe this is the game that Arthur Smith finally realizes. Oh yeah, this Bijan guy's pretty good. I'm scared that that we're gonna get more of those really the cool angle, the Bijan Robinson, however they have
Yeah.
that camera that follows the Falcons have posted a couple of those this year. Those things are awesome. I hope we don't see any. I'm afraid we might see one because Bijan is really good. It turns out, like again, you can talk to your blue in the face about picking a running back eighth, even if he is the one of the best running backs. We might see our old guy CP, Cordell Patterson's
Yeah.
back in the mix too. Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how the offense changes with Heineke. Like, are they going to actually? Well, because in Drake London's still questionable. I don't think he's practiced yet this week, so he might not even be playing. But yeah, the Kyle Pitts thing is like that's. I don't know. I think I have successfully not drafted him in any fantasy leagues yet, but like everyone that
You
has him,
haven't hit.
it's just maddening though to anyone that's ever owned Pitts in any fantasy league. It's like, all right, they're in the red zone and he didn't get a touchdown again. Like it's Julio Jones without the yards, basically. Like
Yeah.
it's odd. Like I'm all for being unpredictable because I think that's another reason why the Vikings can't just run the ball tomorrow, like because that's the worst thing you can be in the NFL. In my opinion, is predictable. Arthur Smith definitely isn't predictable, but he might be zagging a little too much for everyone zigging. It'll be it'll be interesting to see how the offense changes. And it's odd timing because I thought Ritter played decent enough last week and lost to the Titans, but yeah, it again, everything is on the table for this season, the off season. Like Bates, I'm coming on your show for an hour to basically say I don't know what's going to happen. So, but I really don't know. It's there.
No.
Like I would not be surprised by anything.
I wrote I do in a weekly article 5 bold predictions over at the Viking Age. Go check it out right now. It's up everywhere. But I was sitting down and like I don't know what's gonna happen. I don't know. Defense, offense, like this is just such a weird game. You mentioned Drake London, by the way. He has not practiced on Wednesday or Thursday.
Hmm.
He will we'll see what happens later on Friday. We're recording this on Friday morning, so we're not exactly sure what's going on there. I also didn't realize Mike Hughes is on the Falcons, former Vikings first
We got
round
a
pick.
double revenge game, Hughes and
Uh,
Heineke. Yep.
triple
Oh,
revenge game. CPAT, Hughes, and
yeah. Yep.
Heineke. Oh
Yep.
man, and this is going to be. Wouldn't it be weird if like Hughes and CPAT on the same kickoff, just like a double reverse, just burning the Vikings
Oh,
in all
don't
sorts of directions?
Yeah, don't think I haven't thought about a Patterson kickoff return touchdown because if anyone would do it, again, basically kickoffs are almost outlawed in the NFL these days. But if
Yeah,
it would happen from Patterson. Again, I still think Patterson is probably the best kickoff returner in the history of the NFL. That's weird to
for
say,
sure.
but he like statistically he kind of is. But yeah, it'll again, nothing would surprise me. This could be, and I think I, the one thing I would almost guarantee is like things are going to turn on a weird turnover, and whoever can avoid committing that weird, like a someone's in the red zone and it's a pick six the other way, or they're in the red zone on the goal line and they fumble a snap or something like that. I think that's going to be the difference, and it's going to be excruciating for the fan base that it happens against.
Well, my prediction is always pain, but what's your prediction for Sunday?
I picked the Vikings. I put in my picks last night, and I think the over under is what, in the upper 30s. I'd go under. I'd say something along the lines of uh, let's go 16-13 or something like that for the Vikings. I don't feel great about it. I don't feel, again, I would, if I would not gamble on this game in any way, shape, or form. But if I have to pick, like I do every week, I'm picking the Vikings. I still think they have enough. I think they'll make Heineke's life miserable enough on defense. I've been really impressed with how unpredictable the defense and has been. Again, I don't think they're super talented in some of the areas on that defense, but they're EPA, if the first 4 games compared to the last 4 games, is such a stark difference. I really think they're rounding into form, and I think they can do enough to slow down the Falcons, and hopefully the weird mistake bounces in the Vikings' favor this week.
Yeah, I think defense is going to rule the day too. I think both offense. I don't think the Vikings will get in their way offensively, but I think that Arthur Smith will definitely get in his own way for the Falcons. So I am going to be positive. I am going to pick the Vikings. I'm going to say it has to be a 1-score game. So
Well, yeah,
it's going to be.
we had the weird outlier with the 2-score game last week,
But
so yeah,
but
we'll
then
go
it
back to
cost
it.
us
Yeah,
Kirk Cousins. So I mean,
exactly.
let's just stay in the 1-score threshold. Apparently,
Sure.
that's when good things happen. 16-10 Vikings. That's what I'm going with.
Okay, we're
Um,
pretty similar then, all right?
we are pretty similar. So we got our preview. We got our Viking stuff out of the way. Let's talk about what everybody really came here to talk about, huh?
Oh,
Everybody's
I
like, oh
know
my
what's
God,
coming.
pro
I
wrestling.
know
Are
what's
they going
coming.
into it again? We are going to talk about the Dakota marker game. And if you don't know, I'll let you know. The Dakota marker is the rivalry trophy between the North Dakota State Bison and the South Dakota State Jackrabbits. They will play at Dana J. Dykehouse Stadium at 2 o'clock on Saturday. I will be there. I will be up in the press box checking it out. Eric will be watching nervously from his couch, trying to protect his own TV once again. Um,
Actually,
that
I'm not
was a
going to be.
stray. That
I
wasn't
know, no.
fair.
Oh no, no, that's fine. I put it out on Twitter. If for those that don't know, uh, Alexander Madison, by the way, owes me a TV. Not, I'm just kidding. But that during that drop in what game was it? Was it the Chiefs game?
The
I
Chiefs
I
game, yeah.
I I threw a baseball cap, like jokingly, like, oh my gosh, at my TV from 15 plus feet away, and it broke my TV. So that's, yes, that's the ongoing joke. My TV is a hat free zone now. But actually, I am not going to be watching this live because a friend of mine got tickets to the Gophers game, so I'm going to watch
Oh,
another low-scoring football game. I'll be at Huntington Bank, hopefully not freezing too much, but I'll be watching. I'll be checking on my phone and stuff like that, and I have it set to record on, or I have the ESPN Plus, so I can watch it back if I want to. I don't think
it,
I might not want to.
when the Gophers are inching 3 yards per carry and trying to drown out the clock in the first quarter, you
Yep.
might flip it on the old cell phone, see what's going on. The Jackrabbits, of course, #1 in the nation, defending national championships. And North Dakota State is 10th in the nation. I couldn't find a line on this game, but again, like you said, you can find it on ESPN Plus. And I'm also not used to that 0 next to the Bison's ranking, 10 compared to 1. Um, I feel weird asking this, but what's wrong with NDSU? Because they're 6-2. They lost to South Dakota and UND, and South Dakota State both beat both schools by a combined score of 79-24. So what do you think is kind of their issue this year?
It's bizarre. Like, okay, so first of all, can you not find, like, I looked last night when you set the outline to this. I'm like, oh, there's got to be lines somewhere for, there are no FCS lines unless it's like some
Right.
weird, like,
Like
unless it's a playoff game.
even Bet Online had FCS lines last year, and I'm like, oh, they probably have some. This game's not available anywhere. It's
Yeah, I
weird,
went to like
but
all the big sites and there's nothing listed. But okay, if you had to set the line, what would you set it at? I'm thinking probably double digits. I think this is like a 10.5 point spread, and I would probably still pick, oh, this hurts, but the Jackrabbits, like they're the what SDSU had a scare, what, a couple weeks ago. Um,
mhm.
who are they playing?
Southern Illinois. Yeah,
Yeah,
17-14, I believe that game
yeah,
was.
that one
Yeah.
was. But I mean, the Bison have looked like in all their 6 wins, it's like they dominated wire to wire against the team that they were better than. I went to the game at US Bank. It was a nice, comfortable win over Eastern Washington, who's supposed to be a decent team.
Mhm.
And like it's then the South Dakota game happened. It's like that was just an absolute embarrassment at home. Then they went to UND, and it's like, oh, maybe UND's just pretty good this year. And then UND proceeded to get shut out by what was it, Northern Illinois, and barely beat the winless Indiana State the following week. So
Yeah.
it's weird when they just don't, like, again, this is not their most talented team. When you are winning championships for the better part of a decade, it's going to be a high bar to clear. I think especially on their defense, they can get gouged pretty. They have a couple nice playmakers, but they're just from front to back. They aren't as talented, and I think that's getting exposed. And I don't know if it's the coaching falling on deaf ears. I haven't been a huge fan of some of the decisions made by the coaching staff. They're not PJ Fleck levels of conservative, but they can get, like, this team looks. It's the classic, like, they look great with a lead. If you give the Bison a 10-point lead early, they can grind you into a pulp. Still, they can still have plenty of options in the running game, and they have the quarterback that can run. But if they're behind, it just seemed they are just completely out of sorts. That I watched most of that UND game, and it's like I don't know what team this is. So
Yeah.
I have a feeling like if they do fall behind, it could get ugly in a hurry. That they could also make it. I think whoever kind of, if either team gets out to a 10-point lead, I think I'd like that team to hold on. But my hopes are not high. Again, I can't get too upset. It was even in the championship game last year. SDSU was the better team, and I think they're quite obviously the better team this year as well. So it feels weird as a Bison fan going into a game like, well, I hope they do okay. I hope they don't embarrass themselves, because that's usually what they're doing to the other teams for again, the better part of the past decade plus. But it's going to be a challenge for them going into it on Saturday.
Yeah, there are two things that Jimmy Rogers, when I went to his press conference on via Zoom, they do remote ones here, so I wasn't actually at the press conference, but he mentioned two things that I thought were interesting. One, throughout the year, he's kind of mentioned, we're playing a nameless, faceless opponent, and we're gonna go out and beat them. That's pretty much it. This week, he said, we know who's coming, we know who we're playing, we cannot overlook the Bison, and I think he's correct. The other thing that he mentioned too, when he was asked about, hey, what do you think is wrong with NDSU? He said, usually a lot of the things, especially on defense, is just one guy out of place that leads to a big play. I saw a lot of
Yep.
this because I cover a lot of high school football. If you have one guy out of position, it can lead to a 30-yard play. And I think that's what happened against North Dakota specifically, and at times against South Dakota. Ever since last year's Dakota marker game at the Fargo Dome, I'll go further back in the national championship game, but that was, to me, when the Jackrabbits kind of turned the corner, because they were down 21-7 that game. They had 5 false
Uh,
starts along the offensive line. They went in the locker room. They tightened up on defense. They, leaned on the running game with Isaiah Davis and Amar Johnson. And from that point on, I talked with quarterback Mark Gronowski. He said that was the moment where we kind of knew, hey, as long as we stay to what our formula, we can beat anybody and stay ahead of the chains and all that good stuff. I think the Jackrabbits have everything they need to do that on Saturday. And I also think that North Dakota State is going to come in very motivated to kind of say, we're not going anywhere. We're still one of the top teams in the nation. I mean, the whole FCS right now is just upside down because, Montana
hmm
State lost to Idaho last week. Idaho's pushing for a spot. Incarnate Word is still one of the better teams in the FCS right now. It is pure chaos. And the Jackrabbits kind of have a bird's eye view, just sitting at number one, watching everybody beat the hell out of each other. So, what do you think is your prediction for the game on Saturday?
um, I mean, I think I think I would I talked to you right before the national championship game last year,
Mm-hmm.
and I said I think the Jackrabbits pull it off. I didn't think it was going to be as convincing as it turned out to be that game. I think it's going to be more of the same. Like this, it's SDSU and everyone else. They should be heavy favorites to win back-to-back national championships. They have everything in place to do that. And like you said, the rest of the FCS is bizarre. It's there's been upsets left and right. Usually you have these 5 or 6 top heavy teams, and then it's everyone else. This seems like a one team than everyone else. Like I think they're that different. Again, yeah, NDSU. is going to come motivated because they have had their lunch money taken in the last few times they played. And this is, maybe this is the reverse of all of the NDSU championship years where they lost, their only loss of the season was to South Dakota State in this game, then they won everything else. That's kind of my only hope right now is that I'm gonna begrudgingly take the Jackrabbits here. I think they should be heavy favorites for a reason, and I think they'll probably take care of business. Weather looks like it's going to be okay on Saturday there, right? Like
Yeah,
in the
50.
40s,
It's going to be
nothing too
beautiful,
crazy.
actually. 57
Oh,
degrees. I
nice.
just looked. So,
Oh, 57. Wow. All right. I
yeah.
want to go there instead of the Gophers game. But yeah, it's yeah, I would say probably by 2 touchdowns. I think it's going to be like a pretty close to it's something like the 31-17 or something like that for the Jackrabbits. I just don't see how they that unless the NDSU finally puts together a full 60 minutes against a good team, which they haven't done yet this year, even close to that. So we'll see. But yeah, not looking great.
Yeah, it's you know, it's funny because every time I think, okay, this could be a real test for SDSU, this could be a close game. I'm sitting there bored in the press box in the third quarter, like, should I look up another game? Should I like
Eh,
what?
good feeling. It's a good feeling. It
Yeah.
bleeds. Like that. It's so nice to have a good team in your life. I have the Bison have saved me. Believe me, like they have been my beacon of sports fandom for so many years after all the Minnesota sports stuff. It's okay to be bored. Yes, like I have been there 100 times with the Bison. It's like, oh, okay. Well, I know how this goes. We're gonna run the ball 14 more times, get another couple touchdowns. That's fine. It's way better than we got a heart attack every Sunday waiting for us. It's okay to be comfortable on Saturday.
There's a wrestling pay-per-view on Saturday afternoon during the game. If I flip it on in the fourth quarter, I'm just wondering what some of the people are going to be. Is he watching Roman Reigns? And yeah, Roman Reigns, LA Knight. Yeah, it's a banger, real banger.
Yeah, you don't know the outcome of this one. Yeah.
So I think SDSU wins. I think it'll be a little bit. I'm going to go conservative. I'm not going to call 45-21 like the last time they played because that surprised me too. I'm going to say South Dakota State 31, NDSU 21. I think it'll be a little bit close. I think SDSU will have a firm handle throughout most of the game. Yeah, I mean, I think personally, I think we're just waiting for SDSU and Frisco against Montana State, Idaho, and whoever makes it to Frisco. I think that's basically what the lead up is. And that's not to sound arrogant. It's just like you said, it's like SDSU and everybody else right now. And it's just a matter of who that other team is going to be.
Yeah, and I mean, I hate to say it, but like that making the bracket period is not guaranteed
Yeah.
for the Bison. If they lose this one and if they lose one of their last two, it's okay. Again, they have brought me so much joy over they've been my one great football team or great sports team that I root for. It's okay if they have a down year, and if again 6-2 is like a disastrous down year, relatively speaking, that's still pretty good.
So, in closing, what's going on at the Daily Norseman right now?
Oh, we got our usual. The I have been pretty sparse writing the this season just because the day job has been absolutely nuts. I actually got off from the day job this morning, so that's why we got to talk this morning. But it's been. But we have all our usual great stuff. We got our picks out. I think coming up this week for and we have all the latest news and notes. We've had a lot of good stuff coming up from our writers. Chris Gates, our longtime 15-year leader, is still cranking out the content. So that's always a great. It's a one-stop shop for everything Vikings still.
And where can people follow you on social media?
Well, I'm still on Twitter. I'm going to call it Twitter. I'm not going to call it X. That's ridiculous. I'm still sending tweets. I'm not Xing
You're not
posts or whatever. But it's
posting
yeah,
or
yeah.
reposting.
That's yeah, exactly. It's Eric_J_Thompson, like always. That's always the best place to get the first things for me for things like this. And I still hop on the radio in Rapid City and Fargo a lot, and for my rapid fire dumb dad jokes and overreactions during the games. That's always a good place to check.
So thank you for coming on the show today, Eric. Good luck to your Bison on Saturday. And yeah, we'll
You
have.
don't mean that. You don't mean that,
Hey,
Chris. That's fine.
I am an unbiased journalist, honestly. Like if the
There you go.
Jacks
That's
win,
good.
fine. It's more exciting for me because I get to cover a championship team. If they wind up losing, it also becomes more interesting for me because it's kind of like I haven't seen them lose since I've been in Brookings. So
Gosh, you're the good luck charm, aren't you? Yeah.
they are just motivated by my presence. When I come by practice,
There you go.
you can see it in their eyes. I actually have a quote.
Chad's here. Yeah.
I have a quote in one of my transcriptions from AI that says, Mark Gronowski said, "You're so freaking cool." Actually, he didn't say it. It was somebody off to the side, and AI thought it was him. But I have that quote. I have that screenshotted.
It
So
counts. Yep.
it still counts. Still counts.
Yep.
But that is all the time we have for the Viking Age podcast today. We do this every Monday and Thursday, and sometimes Friday, as you can see right here on the Viking Age YouTube channel. And we're also on Apple and Spotify the very next day. So don't forget to rate, comment, share, and subscribe so you never miss a new episode and we can spread the word to the masses. For Eric Thompson, I am Chris Schad, and this has been the Viking Age Podcast.